What's up, folks? Welcome back to the Brick Business Show, where we talk about Lego reselling, Lego business. Super excited to be back here with another episode today. I'm with Jort from Rarity Bricks, based out of South Africa, and I've been really excited to talk to more people around the world running successful Lego investing businesses and Lego businesses. A lot of my content is based in the US. We have people all around the world who are doing this very, very successfully. And so I want to bring in more opinions and more stories from people all around the world to learn about how they can be successful in different markets. So super excited to have you here to talk about South Africa, and you've got really kind of an interesting approach to your Lego reselling business as well, with your own website that you sell on, and social media, and bringing that in and all sorts of different things like that. So super excited. So Jort, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So I love to start off these discussions with a little bit of background and just kind of bringing it back to the Lego, right, before we kind of really get into the business. So I guess to kick us off here, how did you get started with Lego, or did you grow up on Lego? Was it a kind of is it something that your kids are big into, or where did it all begin for you with Lego?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 80s, and sort of Lego was a very big part of growing up and playing. We, had all the classic castle sets and the space sets, and sort of all those. And then obviously we, grew up, got married, had a family, and I think it was the first time back was in 2019. I had my kids with me, and we found this website called Pilot Brick that sells sort of vintage, pre-owned Lego. And we saw this classic castle set that I used to own as a kid, and I was quite excited about seeing this. And I thought, sure, that'd be really nice to get hold of all the nostalgia. And so I bought the thing for quite a price, which I think that was the first indication that there's definitely something there in Lego. Bought it, got it, and I was quite disappointed because it was incomplete. It was in poor shape and just not what I expected. So over time, sort of restored it, tried to source the old parts and just sort of get it back to life, and then actually eventually sold it again for a small profit. And yeah, sort of from there realized maybe there's something here. That was this set you behind me, and that's sort of the as my logo as well with Rarity Bricks, that's sort of where it all started. Yeah, and then sort of my kids got interested in it, and we started buying more and more Lego sets, pre-owned old stuff from my days, and then COVID hit, and sort of enjoyed building it more and more, and that's sort of how the Lego started again, and sort of bringing it back into our family. And then for the business.
So I mean, it sounds like my story as well, very similar to my story, where I was going back and trying to find sets from years ago that I was building. When I got back into it years later, I wasn't looking for sets that are currently available on the shelves. I was looking for the old stuff, that was around. Did you get a bit of a shock when you first started to see the prices, or were you already aware of what happens with Lego prices, or was that a bit of a shock to you?
No idea. No, I must say, when I first, again, when I went to this website and saw these sets and seeing the prices that they were going for, I couldn't believe it. And specifically also in the condition they were at and the people were selling them for. So yeah, no, definitely was a big shock. And again, I think that's how I started realizing that there's definitely something in that, because obviously there must be a market, because somebody must be paying those prices. So big shock, big shock.
Right. And so this was 2019, you said, and I saw, I had a look at your website, and in the About Us and the kind of bio section, you mentioned that your business really kicked off in around 2020. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So during lockdown.
Pretty much during lockdown, like I said, we got these sets in. Started building them up, different classic space, classic castle. I was fortunate that I was actually able to buy a big lot of old bricks, old parts from people that were clearing their houses, and were able to find all these parts, these old parts that you don't get anymore today. So I think that sort of kicked me off in terms of that I was able to complete a lot of these incomplete, really broken down sets. And restore them. And I sort of read up a little bit about, obviously with the sun damage, read up a little bit about, how you can actually try to get that shine back, or try to whiten the bricks again. So did a bit of research on that, and just really try to get the sets to the level that I remember them at as a kid. And from there, I think, we saw that there was a need for other people that also needed a dependable place to buy Lego, that when the seller said it was complete, that it was actually complete. So I think that's where, I'm a little bit OCD and perfectionist when it comes to these things. So I would go to Bricklink and make sure that every single part is there, and just make sure that when I sold something, it was pretty much in the same condition I got it from.
Yeah. So that site that you first started buying from, you mentioned that was, not so trustworthy. And when we had a little bit of chat back and forth before this call, you mentioned that eBay is not really a thing in South Africa. Is that right?
Yeah. So eBay is available, but it implies shipping from either the US or UK, or sort of somewhere in Asia. So obviously the distance and our postal system in itself is not very reliable. Our basic postal system, it's not as much of an option or easy as accessible as it is, sort of elsewhere in the world. Unfortunately, we do have our own platforms that sort of mimic the similar similar sort of eBay style, but it's not nearly as developed and as advanced.
Okay. And so when you first saw these prices going up, and then, as you started to kind of think about, you were ordering parts to finish the sets that you really wanted to build, and then you started to realize that maybe there was a bit of a business idea here, or a business opportunity here. How did that idea first take shape in your mind? Was it something that, like, at that point, were you thinking, I could sell used sets, or I could help people to finish their used sets, or I could invest in sets where they grow in value? What was that initial thought for you?
Honestly, the initial thought was really just to actually get the sets in, and I really enjoyed the restoration of it, and sort of that build up part of it, and then it would be nice to be able to then sell it off and fund the next set that I wanted to buy. So really, when it started, it was almost just to fund my own hobby, and not to make it too expensive. The investing part and the realization that it was actually an asset class on its own really only started when I started digging around on YouTube, sort of, and on Facebook and other places for information, because I'm somebody that when I find something new, I try to learn as much as I possibly can about it, and sort of gain as much as information as quickly possible. So I was looking up old sets. I was looking up how you restore them, and how you could sell them, and then started seeing more and more these sort of YouTube videos, contents coming up about investing. And then from that, sort of, I think, was my first dive into, there's actually a world of an asset class here that really performs well, and if can really be built into a really good business idea.
Yeah, fantastic. But at that point, you were probably seeing the challenges of your marketplace as kind of a little bit more obvious, because you were looking at content online, which is obviously based in different markets like the US, where we're kind of spoiled for choice. We have Amazon, we have eBay, we have a lot more available to us to build the business on. So were you kind of looking at this thinking this is going to be a much bigger battle to make a successful Lego selling business in South Africa at that point? How were you kind of thinking it would shape up to be?
Absolutely. Look, I think initially when I started, and obviously the content that I was watching and looking at was, as you say, all US based. I thought, I can just take this blueprint and really just replicate it locally, and it will be fine. It will work, because it makes sense. But as you rightly says, when I started sort of investigating a little bit, I found that there isn't really an investment or a resale culture within in South Africa per se. There are the individual that would sell they would say, for instance, buy some sets or a duplicate of a set in the shops, and then about 3-4 years later they'll sell it on marketplace, Facebook Marketplace, at a slight sort of profit, just to fund their hobby, as say. But there wasn't really anything local that indicated that there was, that there was a reseller market, that there was an area where people could go and sort of easily have access to these second-hand sets. Some of the platforms, the local platform that's similar to eBay, there were a couple of people here and there that sold some things, but I mean, it was really just, again, overpriced, number one, and very, very, very scarce. You'd find one or two things here and there. I remember at one point I was looking at collecting the Winter Village range for myself, and I really struggled to actually find anything worthwhile to buy at any decent prices. So yeah, no, it's a completely sort of still very young, immature market in South Africa. And I think that was what the challenge was for me at that point, to make a decision, how am I going to take this forward?
Yeah, I mean, that makes it, like, to me, that feels a lot scarier than, I feel like we're very spoiled for choice in other markets, and you really had to carve your own path. And so, at that time, had you ever heard of anybody else in South Africa doing something like this, or was it just those overpriced examples that you saw a couple of? You don't know how much they're actually selling. You don't know, if they're successful. There were no communities, no content creators, nowhere to really turn to learn and to network and to grow, with other people.
No, nothing at all. I mean, I remember I actually went onto Facebook. I tried to find out if there were any sort of local communities or any sort of local person that I could learn from and gain some experience from. But absolutely not. No formalized community, no formalized example that I could follow. So yeah, no, it was wide open space. And I mean, it's good and bad. I think obviously in the downside, as you mentioned, it's quite scary. But obviously the upside was that it presented a huge opportunity, because there's this massive gap, and it's this void that's waiting for somebody to fill it. So,
I love that mentality. Firstly, like, that's, I love hearing that, because I obviously talk to a lot of newcomers to the Lego investing world, and I do hear some of their little, the hesitations at the start, some of the things that they're afraid of in getting started and different things. And that's usually my response is, like, the reason that, this is so lucrative and people can do so well with it is because so many people are afraid to start, and so when we are the ones that take that step forward, that realize that if we just invest in our knowledge, learn how to master this game, we will also be the ones that reap the reward, because a lot of other people are afraid of the economy, or they're afraid of, putting money on their shelves, and, all the different concerns that people have. So absolutely on the same page with the mindset. And so then you were looking at this challenge, you could see the opportunity, but you're looking at this challenge. Take us through some of the, how 2020 shaped out for you and the beginning of Rarity Bricks. What were some of the first steps that you took to get started?
So yeah, so as I mentioned, I first started with trying to get as much knowledge as I could, even if it was not completely 100% relevant to my own situation, and probably also in a bit of ignorance. I did try initially to pretty much implement that blueprint that sort of you guys talk about a lot locally. So I remember I started buying some Lego, and I sort of managed it as any asset class. I was going to buy low, so I was going to buy it at a discount as much as I could. But at that stage, I wasn't doing the fundamentals, sort of fundamental research. So I remember the first sealed set. So I'd now obviously been doing the pre-owned stuff, the vintage stuff, and selling that off here and there. Was a nice market. But I wanted to now venture into the sealed sets, to actually buy them now to resell later. And I remember going into the stores and seeing these sets on discount. It was still the Razor Crest, the Mandalorian Razor Crest, and it was 25% off, and I was chuffed. I saw it, I took it, and I bought it. And it was the first Lego set that I bought at the time that I thought, okay, now I've made an investment today, without realizing that it wasn't even close to retirement, that it was going to be sitting on my shelf for many a year. But yeah, so that's how it started. I started looking for sets. I started looking at that blueprint of saying, let's get some sets in that we think will do well. And then I sat with the situation. I'd now bought these sets, but I didn't have a platform to sell them on. I looked at the local markets. I looked at our version of eBay. I looked at our version of Amazon, sort of found a little bit about the costs. And at that stage, it just didn't make sense, given, sort of the overheads that I would have to carry and the limited amount that I had. I thought about, just selling on Facebook, but, that's got its own challenges as an individual, just selling sets. So Rarity Bricks, in essence, started out of a need to create my own platform, basically, to sell retired sets. That was really the original idea. It was never really initially the idea to become a business that's actually, has got an e-commerce component to it. It was really just to create this platform. I had the vision of create the platform, make people want to come there and sell my stuff, my investments off at some time. But yeah, obviously that was I think the light bulb that started. And I started it very small. I mean, we can talk a little bit about it more later, but it started on Facebook. It started with brand and an identity. And I had to take little steps every step of the way and learn, because I did everything myself. Unfortunately, again, I like to do things on my own, and also overheads is, if when you're starting out a new business, you really need to curtail those. So yeah, I pretty much had to just do every little step and learn as I went along.
That's fantastic. I love, there's a couple of things that I want to unpack here, because I think there's a lot of lessons here for anyone who's listening or watching here. Firstly, it sounds like you mentioned that you bought your inventory before you had a plan to sell it, right? And so then Rarity Bricks was your answer to how to sell things. So you had to build your own brand in order to be able to sell things, because it wasn't like you had Amazon and eBay to bring you customers. So, I mean, I guess the first thing is, do you regret any of that? Do you look back and think, okay, maybe I should have had a bit of a plan before I bought the inventory? Because that is kind of something that I would say in my content. I would always tell people, like, look, you're going to be a seller, right? It's not just all investing. You're also going to have to run an e-commerce business. Think about how you're going to sell your inventory before you buy it. At the same time, hearing your story is kind of like, it's inspiring, because anybody out there who forgets to think about how to sell and they just start buying, if they have the determination that you have shown here, they can still carve out a space for themselves. You know what I mean? So, like, even in the face of, a lack of opportunity for selling online, you've been able to create it out of necessity, because you already had bought the inventory. So do you feel like buying the inventory kind of gave you that burst of, okay, I've got no choice now and I'm going to make this work? Or if you could go back, would you have scouted things out a little more before you bought it?
Yeah, no, 100% right. I fell into the trap. I wanted investment. I wanted to move some of my, sort of regular assets, shares, and all of those type of things into a new asset class. And I bought the sets. And as you rightly say, I fell into the trap of feeling that I've now made an investment. I have these sets that are going to increase in value. Had no idea right in the beginning of the fact that it might not sell as, and that's what I'm saying. That's the trap I fell in, is that I thought that I could just use the blueprint that sort of is in the first world markets, the bigger markets, of saying, you buy the stuff and there is already platforms out there and you just sell it. I did not realize the liquidity, sort of on our side is completely different. So would I have done it differently? Maybe, but I still feel like, as you say, it gave me the motivation to start the business. And even though it's been a lot of work, there's also been a lot of reward. It's not just, it's not just financial. So in essence, it's this sort of thing that's developed and sort of organically grown, is actually provided a lot of other good returns as well. So yeah, I'm glad that the journey got me, and let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And again, like, I definitely want to emphasize that determination piece here, because I think anybody who wants to be successful with this, if you have the hunger and the drive and the determination to do it, there's all these different creative ways that you can figure out how to actually run a Lego selling business. And so, I want to illustrate some more of that by talking more about your story on how you actually run things, because, usually I'm talking about Amazon and eBay, which honestly, it's quite easy, right? They bring us customers. I know a lot of people complain about the fees that we have to pay on Amazon and eBay, which can be a lot, right? At least 15% off of your sale price. And some people think that's too much and they don't want to sell on Amazon. But in my opinion, it's like a small price to pay for endless streams of customers without having to do any of your own marketing. You are, constantly doing your own marketing for your business. You're bringing in your own customers to your own website in order to sell your Lego sets. So I definitely want to talk more about that, because there's opportunity there for other people to do the same thing in marketplaces all around the world. So you mentioned Rarity Bricks started on Facebook, right? So that's where you started to first sell things. How did that look? How did that start to shape up? What were some of the steps that you took on Facebook at the start?
Well, I think the first thing that luckily I realized early is that there were two things that are really important: is building a brand and giving that brand a good name in terms of reputation, because it's a small business. You need to establish yourself as somebody, and even to this day, actually, I still face that challenge where people need to trust you. They need to trust that they're going to give you their money and you're going to provide them with what you said you did. So I think early on, it was about creating the platform. So I did a Facebook page. I had a logo, which was a little bit different than the one I have now. And I created some content. So I luckily, at that stage, was quite fortunate that I had a lot of pre-owned, a lot of vintage sets. And I knew that would be my hook. That would be my niche. If I started taking some photos and doing some content around that, and became the guy that has a lot of vintage Lego to sell. That was sort of to start off that identity, because nobody else was doing that specifically either. So so spent a lot of time creating content, photos of sets and things like that, and then obviously started selling a little bit here and there. And I think from early on realized that I needed to ask and beg sometimes for actually feedback, so ask the customers. So obviously, number one, I needed to make sure that my customer service was 5 stars. So I'd make sure that I kept good communication, made sure that what I sold is what they got, and then I would ask them to please leave feedback, sort of reviews, so that I can build up this sort of this reputation per se. So that's really where it started. Started on Facebook page. And sold primarily on that. It evolved into a shop on Facebook. So initially it was just marketplace pure on its own. Then as I got a little bit more confident in all the things you can do with Facebook, I added a shop to it, and sort of added some inventory and things like that. But people kept asking me, "Where's your website? Can we please go onto your website?" And I was very reluctant, because it obviously meant a lot of either work or a lot of capital outlay to create this thing, and I didn't necessarily think or know if it would make any difference at the time. So that's, in a nutshell, where we started, pretty much Facebook based, and it did well. I mean, I think we built quite at least a presence there, and was able to create the brand, I think, which was really important.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you were kind of making content at the start. What kind of content was that? Were you actually doing any reviews of sets or anything like that? Or was it mostly, like photo of set, like a couple of little pieces of details about it? What were kind of some of those early ways that you started to spread the word with content?
Yeah, so in an ideal world, I would have loved to have, I think, done more interactive content with video and reviews. I think that does carry a lot of weight, but I just didn't have the time, because I still have a permanent job. So I chose the easy route of actually just Lego photography. And again, as I mentioned, luckily I was fortunate that I had sets that were in demand and were scarce, and people would get excited about them. So I would create, say for instance, a classic castle sort of battlefield. So I had a lot of Black Falcon, sort of a castle with a lot of Black Falcons and then the lions, and they would sort of have an attack, and just sort of just to catch people's attention. And then obviously some of those sets I would then sell on Facebook as well. So to create this expectation that people can come have a look and they will find something there that, is worth saying. So it was really just, there was I had stuff that people wanted to buy. That is in essence where it came from. I would have loved to have done more, content reviews and things like that, but I just didn't have the capacity at that stage.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, it wasn't necessary. You still were able to grow your following, your audience. So you mentioned that trust was obviously a big concern, and I could fully see that being a problem, right? Because if a buyer goes to Amazon, they honestly, a lot of them don't even realize they're buying from a third-party seller. A lot of them think that they're buying from Amazon, and they're clicking that big orange buy box. On eBay, also, you get the opportunity to compare sellers against each other, look at the feedback rating of one versus the other, read comments of past purchasers, and also know that you are backed up by eBay, eBay's return policies, all of those different things. So selling directly on Facebook has always been, an area where it's just a little harder as a buyer to know that you can trust the seller. So what are some of the things that you did, and still do to this day? How is your whole approach when it comes to trust and building that trust? Is there something where, So you mentioned the reviews. Obviously, you want people to give you ratings, but is there anything else that you have tried to implement in terms of how you work with your customers, how you serve your customers, how you post your content, anything like that, that helps to build that trust?
Yeah, so I think the two fundamental things is, number one is communication, really good and regular, or sort of immediate communication and regular communication, and full transparency. So for instance, when an order is placed, up to this day, I will communicate immediately with them personally as well, and say, thank you for your order, and then take them through the whole process. When the order is placed, when the payment's made, when the shipping is getting ready, and all the way through to your parcels being sent off. With regards to transparency, if sets have got defects in them, or there's any kind of issue with it, I have a description in my website. I spend quite a bit of time adding detail in terms of where the set came from, when it was, sort of when it was manufactured, when it was retired, and there's a specific section that says what the condition of the set is. And if the set either is a high value set, or if it's something that has a defect, I'll actually take photos of the specific set. So I do have the generic photos on because it just presents better, but I'll have secondary or third line would have a photo of the actual set, so that they can have an idea of it. And I also tell, on my terms and conditions, say that I would happy to provide photos of any set. But it remains a challenge, the trust issue. I'll tell you a story that actually happened today, because I've been able to build a decent review on Google. Because the other thing I did that was very important is I started a Google merchant or Google business profile as well, which I think I would recommend anybody to do, where you basically, you can get Google reviews in. And it I think carries more weight than in Facebook, to be honest. And so I've made sure that I've built up the reviews, and that people give, I've been lucky that people give quite detailed reviews. It's not just a star, they actually explain and provide things around that. But to this day, I still have, trust issues. I had a big order that came through, ironically, last night. And I got a phone call this morning from my husband that was a bit concerned because he hadn't made payment yet, and he said he was coming to Cape Town, where I live, and if you wanted to please just meet me, and before they did the transaction. So I said, no, that's 100% fine, but obviously I have a 48-hour hold policy, because I keep them for 48 hours and then they go back online. So I said, no, can we then? I'm happy for us to do that, but can we maybe do a video call? So we ended up with a video call where I actually went through the sets with him. I showed all the individual sets with the details and the defects and everything else. And eventually, he was quite happy. I even showed him the address. Now, that's quite extreme, obviously, to do, but it was a large order. It wasn't just a normal order. But those, I find that once you've done those customers come back again, and they also will tell other people, but he went out of his way. And that, I think that's the advantage of a small business. Although I don't have the time, I make the time to make sure that my customers feel comfortable, and they feel that they are, that I provide them excellent service with. So
yeah, absolutely. And it is important, because marketing is an area that you will depend on for your business, and so you do need to put that little bit of extra effort into customer service. I was scrolling through your Instagram, and I saw one of your packages that you were sending out to an order fulfillment, and the packaging was beautiful. Like, it was obviously an area that you focused on. You had branded packaging, so it from that photo alone, I was able to see immediately that customer service is important to you, and important to your business. So I think you've given some really, really golden kind of piece of information there, that anybody who is thinking about starting your own Lego selling website, or website to sell anything at all, where you can't lean on Amazon or eBay to bring the trust. There's some massive tips there, and setting up Google Business is a great one. Making sure you have a website to build on the trust that you got from Facebook initially. Making sure you're focusing on your customer service, your communication, your packaging, coming across as an official, legitimate business with things like branded packaging and a good website. And then obviously going a little bit above and beyond for your customers with video calls whenever they need it. But also one of the tips that you gave there, I think is very important for eBay sellers as well, which is the being very clear about defects.
Yeah.
And, if you are someone out there who's selling used Lego sets on eBay, just make sure that you take, good pictures of the listing of the item, including, even if it's a sealed brand new in-box set, but it has some corner damage on the box or something like that. Just take a quick snap of it and add it to the listing. It'll really help with, with people trying to request returns and leaving negative feedback. Okay, fantastic. Now, I definitely want to start moving in the direction of talking about your website a little bit more, because I think this is an area that, a lot of people are going to be curious about. So you were selling on Facebook. You got a lot of questions about your website. Where's your website? I want to go somewhere where I can kind of see everything you have in stock. And then you started thinking about the website. Did I see that you only launched it pretty recently, the website?
Yeah, it was launched in June last year, actually. So it is
Okay.
pretty recent. It's just about 9 months now.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess what was that process like in terms of, setting all of that up? Firstly, do you have a background in any technology at all? Or, how did you look into starting an e-commerce website?
Yeah, no, that was another challenge. I'm completely not in the field. I'm actually a medical doctor. But again, I think as with everything else, I wanted to learn. I wanted to get as much information. So I tried to, get as much info before I started. I looked at the big website, sort of groups, and ended up having to make a decision on which one to go with. Price did play a role, and also ease of use also played a role. I think it's very useful for somebody that's starting out to use a platform that is easy to use and easy to develop. But still, with all of that, it still took me about, I would say, 4 months to build the thing, because I built it from scratch, and I built it on my own without any IT assistance. Lots of learnings in between, lots of friends and people that needed to test certain things and sort of and help out with advice. But yeah, so it was a process. Definitely was a slow process. I mean, look, I didn't obviously work on it full time. I probably could have done it in a month if I had more time. But I wanted to make sure that it works, because I think if you make that big step, and when I launched, or prior to the launch, I actually had a lot of social media and a lot of hype around that. The last thing you want is for it then to crash or to not work the way it should. You get one bite of the cherry, and that's it. So I needed to make 100% sure that it would work, that it's clean, and that it's easy to use. But yeah, it was a bit of a process, but it's definitely doable with today's technology and today's platforms. It's really not that daunting.
So you said it was built from scratch, like you coded it. You didn't build it on Shopify or something like that?
No. I used it. No, I used a template. So I used a platform. No, sorry.
Okay.
I used Wix, but I had to. I basically had to. There was obviously I didn't use a pre-existing website that I could build in. No, coding and those type of things I would leave to the professionals. I don't think that would be the way to go, honestly. Because even with the tools and the ability to actually slot things in, there's a lot that you have to think about in terms of how your website is set out, how the pages flow into each other, how the links work. It's you do have to plan it. You can't just go in and do it. You actually have to go in and sort of take it step by step and recheck the whole time, to make sure that all the elements that needs to be there is flawless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more involved with, that kind of thing than, again, selling on a third-party marketplace that's set up for you.
Yeah.
Can you share a little more detail about some of the, I guess, the specifics in terms of getting your inventory into Wix? Like, how does Wix, I guess, firstly, does it, like, I know it's never going to be easy, but does it at least simplify it to a reasonable amount? What is the process like to actually get, your listings live on there? Do they have plugins and kind of things like that for e-commerce that make it easy to quickly take your inventory and upload it? I had a quick look at your website. It looks like you're using stock images. You're not taking photos, which probably will help a lot with, making things quicker. But what's the process like in terms of, after the website was built, than just like managing your inventory and your listings.
So absolutely. So that is why these platforms are built and why they're successful. It is definitely, they have streamlined the process a lot. It is relatively easy to add inventory, and they do add a lot of plugins and a lot of information, a lot of good dashboards that you can use to analyze data. So inputting inventory is pretty straightforward. As you rightly said, I use stock photos. I still have to crop them a bit because they don't always, need to make sure that you have the right sort of image overlay. But yeah, stock images is definitely the way to go. It just presents better. And I think then in terms of the ease of use, that depends on how much detail you're willing to put in. So if you go through some of my pages, you'll see that there's a lot of content per product. So I've chosen to you add the product, you add the detail, your price. And it goes down to your SKUs, your quantity, what was your base price, what you're selling it for, what kind of shipping do you want to use. So all of that is intuitive, which is really nice. But the actual content is the thing that takes a lot of time. So putting in, as I say, describing the set, giving some background information around it, all the basic type of things that people want to see, when they look at products and things like that. That does take time because that's not automated. That's literally sitting behind a keyboard and typing in things and sort of working through it. But the process is pretty, once you've built the website, the process of putting inventory on and also the order process thereafter is actually quite straightforward and can be quite automated. You can send out, once the product is sold, you can plug in obviously all your pay gates. It sends automatic emails. You can do, everything can be automated, as much as you want. I choose to do some of the processes manually because there are some, as I mentioned, interactions that I would like to continue with my customers because they immediately pick up if it's an automated email versus a personal email. So it depends on volumes, obviously. Sometimes, things are just automated. But yeah, the websites, both Shopify and Wix, work really well. Without giving the one above the other, I think Wix is good for creating, good-looking websites. But I think that Shopify has, specifically in South Africa, does have more plugins and more, it's more e-commerce sort of orientated, whereas Wix is more content creator orientated. Although it works perfectly fine, for content, for e-commerce as well. But yeah, process is not too difficult.
Okay, gotcha. And so you mentioned that even the order fulfillment piece is reasonably kind of well set up. There's automated emails when an order comes in and different things. What does in terms of shipping and different things like that, does that also integrate into it? For example, would you be able to print shipping labels from when you're packaging an order and fulfilling or different things like that, or do you have to go to the post office? How does that actual fulfillment flow on your side?
So that's a little bit tricky, unfortunately, because of the fact that we're not, again, in the first world country, or say in America. Wix and Shopify have a lot of integration in these big markets, and obviously with the main, so the same with shipping, it is integrated into most of the shipping, the courier companies and the United States Postal Service. But when you come into a smaller country like South Africa, there aren't really plugins for me to communicate directly. Because I have a courier company that I use. So I've got a account with a courier company, and they predominantly my fulfillment set. But I have to manually do the process of once the orders come in, to print the label on my platform, my courier company platform, and then do the manual shipping on that part. So that's a manual process. Obviously, in other countries, there's most probably there are plugins available, but that's in the current state of art is it's a manual process.
Okay, gotcha. And in terms of driving traffic to the website, so we talked about how you've grown on Facebook. You've also got an Instagram account that you've grown on. But for the website, is there anything that you're doing specifically for that in terms of driving traffic? Are you focused on SEO, for example, and ranking on Google? Are you doing any paid traffic to your website at all?
Yeah, so on those two aspects, I think SEO is quite more complex than I think people think often. I was be honest, I tried to play around with it initially and to certain levels of success, but I've actually decided, and I've now actually just got somebody in professional to help me specifically just to set up my SEO, because that's it's a very technical type of area. You can go through courses and tutorials and anything else, but there's very technical specific algorithms that if you're not in the business, you will never know about it. So I think that's the step where I'm at now, is to actually get my SEO of my business to improve a lot. Up to this point, I compensated through advertising, very specifically targeted advertising, whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, or on Google itself. And I have a specific strategy that I follow. So I only advertise in certain times when I know there's increased traffic, and try to capture the market that I think that would potentially benefit, or that I would potentially be able to generate more sales from. Because you can have a lot of people go sort of get onto your website and a lot of traffic, but if you're not converting those, then it really doesn't help. So that's been, I think, over the last 6 months, been the process where I've been trying to identify what's the best platforms to advertise on, and to see what results work and what don't. And again, the platforms do help. Both Wix and Shopify have got their own sort of AI integration, where they would sort of retarget ads into certain areas. You pay a little bit more for that, but absolutely worth it. I've seen the benefits of targeted advertising in terms of revenue.
That's fantastic. And so you're seeing a good return on the ad spend, like a return on an investment from what you spend on ads?
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah. And for me, it's really luckily it's not, because I know if I can build enough of a base of customers and returning customers, it will actually start generating more and more leads on its own. And obviously, as my social media grows as well, that will generate as well. And as my SEO comes in, then the ad spend will be, definitely will not be as necessary. But I would advise anybody who starts out, that wants to have a presence and make them, sort of make themselves relevant, spend that money on advertising. Don't skimp on that. I think that's really important to build that initial presence.
I love it. Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the other things that I really like from what you're saying here is, I think another one of the deterrents for some people to go down this path of creating their own website would be SEO is too complicated. I don't know how to make my website rank on Google. And as you've just called out, when, something seems too complicated, hire someone to do it for you. Don't worry about it. Don't let it be the big reason why you don't start your business. Don't miss out on opportunities because there's one part of it that you think, is over your head or too complex. And so you've kind of shown that, this is an area that, yes, it's very important to a successful e-commerce website is SEO. But I don't need to do everything in my business. I'm doing a lot as it is, and I'll outsource that. And then I will also outsource the customer getting by buying ads, right? Because when you're buying ads, that's what you're doing. You're inviting Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or whatever to send you customers for a fee. And, it's working well. So there's all these different creative ways that you can get buyers, that you can find people to actually buy your stuff, especially when your product is good, your service is good, and what you're offering is up to scratch. What about support? So, running your own website is another area that a little bit of work would need to go into, would be in the area of support. Obviously with selling on eBay and Amazon, customer service is mostly handled or at least helped out by those platforms, especially with Amazon sellers who are doing Fulfilled by Amazon, FBA. All customer service is handled by Amazon, or almost all of it. But in your case, you have to respond to every question. You have to, deal with every problem. I noticed on your website, you have like a chat widget on the bottom corner where people can, ask a question, and then you have an email. You have a place where you're taking emails from people, so email list. So I guess how much work is it firstly to support the business, answer questions and queries and different things? And then can you talk a little bit more about the chat widget and different things and how that impacts things? Do you use that to make sales, to try and convert people into buyers? Is it work? Kind of how does that flow?
Yeah, so no, that's an interesting question. I think my first answer is, in terms of customer support, I think if you're doing everything right and you're doing what you need to be doing, your the amount of customer support that you need to provide is less in terms of complaints and issues and concerns. Obviously, they creep in here and there, and that then you need to manage them. In terms of, so I state very clearly on on my Facebook page and also on the website that it is a part-time business, and the responses might be immediate and sometimes might not. So, and then I've made that decision that I will try as best, either myself or, because it's a family-run business, so sometimes my partner will be online and have a look. I have it often in the background, sort of when I'm working, just and if something pops up, I can obviously respond to it. But I don't want there to be expectation that it will be instantaneous, because it is not an Amazon or a sort of an eBay. It's a small-run business. Interesting enough, I think my biggest challenge with customer support, or with this type of support, comes with people now asking for advice in terms of their second-hand sets, or they want to sell their sets, and can we assist and can we help? So I do encourage them to rather send emails, even if they've sent a chat, say please send us an email, send some photos, and we'll take it from there. And then we try to manage as many of those as we can. The chat feature works well. It basically gives you a notification. You can respond to it. Again, it is something that I chose at the time to add, because it does create that sense that we are there. There's a presence. I think and luckily, as I mentioned, it's not been overwhelming so far. But I do foresee that, depending on the growth from the revenue side, because currently, I'm not employing anybody. We're doing it as a family business. If things increase significantly, then you could look at maybe sort of again outsourcing some of that, or otherwise then you make a decision, say unfortunately we're not able to respond to chats, but please send us an email, respond as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And did I see? So another thing that I wanted to ask you about was: is there another area where you get business from in terms of making sales? Do you do anything in person? Because I was scrolling through your Instagram, I saw a picture where I think you were at a convention or something. You had a stall set up somewhere. It looked like your two kids were with you. So is that another part of your business? Do you do in-person sales as well?
Yes. So it wasn't as much a business opportunity as it was doing it for the experience in a way when it started. It's a local market that started up for sort of, they call it the geek market, sort of selling things, superhero, comic books, all kind of that type of. It was a very unique Cape Town market. Cape Townians really like their markets. So I got the opportunity, and I wasn't really sure how to manage it, and I thought let's try it out. And as you rightly said, I decided, and let's take my kids with and let them experience customer service and the way your traditional little stand works with selling your lemonade or whatever else. Let's try that out as experience. So it went really well. It was very unexpected. I took some sets with that I thought would really sell well, and then I took some minifigures that I sort of decided to do as a sideline. I had a couple of minifigures lying around, and the minifigures just all sold out. So, and actually for that month, the revenue out of the minifigures alone was astonishing. So from there, I did the second market, and then I did a third market, and it's become it's a small part of the business. We do it because we love it, and we love the interaction with the customers and the people around. Obviously, it creates awareness if there's a bit of a campaign or something online. But it's just nice to have I think it's the closest I'll ever get to a brick and mortar shop. And it's quite enjoyable. And like I said, it actually makes a lot of revenue from a very different avenue. So the minifigure business is never something that I envisioned and thought that would be something I'd be interested in, and I'm still not. But it's carrying its weight, so I can't let it go.
So I hear this from a lot of people who go down that path of selling minifigs, selling used parts and minifigs, or brick and mortar store owners, which is the market for minifigures often surprises people, in terms of how strong it is. It's pretty substantial. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about sourcing and your buying strategy, and how you buy your inventory. You mentioned that you started off with used sets and realizing that, you could complete sets and sell them, and vintage sets and different things. Is that still your focus today, now that you've got kind of a fully fledged e-commerce website that sells Lego? Are you primarily selling vintage sets, or have you moved more in the direction of the investing side of things? Do you stock new sets that are still available in big retail stores today? And how, broadly, I guess, without giving away your secret sauce, how do you source your inventory?
No, so we've definitely pivoted. As I mentioned, I started with a pre-owned vintage stuff. It's sold well, but it's very time consuming. And even although it's still a part of the business and still part of the website because it is sort of our identity and our niche, the plan was always to move into new sealed sets. And I think the strategy from my side, and again, maybe that's something that is worthwhile sharing, is that when you start out, obviously, typically there's a waiting period. So you buy sets that are retiring now, but you're going to wait 1 year if you're lucky, but 2-3 years probably sometimes to actually sell. When I started, sort of looking into maybe building this business, I actually looked into almost the taboo secondhand market where you buy retired sets already at a slight premium, so that I had inventory to be able to sell immediately. And the plan was to even if there was a slight margin, just to start having a presence of we sell rare, exclusive retired sets. It started actually with the Winter Village range. I was able to source just literally from Facebook buyers and from local people, quite a large collection of Winter Village sets. Where initially the margins were small, but it grew over time, and it actually sustained the business for the first 2 years to be selling these already retired sets at their price, up to the point where I could then start selling the sets that were retiring at that stage, that then matured enough that obviously it purchased them on a discount to be able to sell them, and that the margins of sort of would get wider and wider. So that's really the strategy. I still get some old stuff in if I see an opportunity where there's vintage sets that's at a good price, and I feel up to it. I'll go for it. I've just got another black pearl that I was able to procure, that I've restored and put together, and that'll be going on the market soon, or on the website soon. And I know that's quite sought out by a lot of people in South Africa. So I will take those opportunities if they come along, but a lot less than before. In terms of sourcing, I started initially going to stores and looking at deals and discounts, and I still do to an extent, but it takes a lot of time. And especially when you start looking at quantity, initially when I started, I'd buy 1 set or 2 sets, and I was creating inventory. But as it's grown, and you're looking at building inventory more and more, it's not feasible. So I think what I can mention is that I didn't want to go the direct Lego route, because I don't see myself as a Lego authorized seller. I had the option of joining the Lego sort of group, or the Lego community, or the reseller group, where I would buy directly from Lego, but I don't feel that's my place, and that's why also I don't sell anything that's current. I leave that to the official Lego stores. I won't ever sort of sell that on my website, but I have, through connections and contacts and in the Lego community, have been able to find suppliers that are able to sell to me at a discount that I'm looking for in quantity. So I am, in essence, buying from official Lego sellers that have the capacity to sell extra quantity to me at a discount beyond the normal price, and that's helped a lot. And I think that definitely that advice I can give: if you can find a source where you can find reliable quantity of sets at a discount when you want to buy it, so when I have capital to spend and I'm ready to my strategy to invest in these sets, then I can just pull the trigger there, and I don't have to scourge around to go find. But I mean, again, if the deals are there, I'll take them. So if there's something up for 40% off or 30% off at my local Lego store, I'll go buy it.
Yeah. There's so many different ways, and sourcing is something that we can get very creative with how we approach it. And if anybody was listening to that and thinks, oh, I don't want to start this because I'm finding a distributor or finding a partner is too much work and too difficult, and I'm not great at picking up the phone and talking to people and different things. That's just the more recent way, that that Rarity Bricks is being stocked. It was previously vintage sets. Retail arbitrage is still a part of it, just going into stores and buying. Like, there's much more simple ways of finding inventory that you still use, that I run my entire business on still buying from retailers, because I prefer it over trying to go to distributors. And there's just so many different ways we can be creative with sourcing inventory. So I one of the other things I wanted to ask you was around, you mentioned you still work full time. Was that right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great, because I talk to a variety of people who do this full time, sell Lego full time, and that's inspiring for a lot of people who want to quit their job and become Lego sellers full time. But also, I still work full time. I like showing people that this is a business that can be done while you still keep your job. It can be a side income. It can be a very lucrative side hustle. So I love seeing that other people are super successful while still working full time. Can you talk a little bit about how, about that piece of it, and doing, this part time? How much time do you think that it takes per week to run your store? How much of a kind of a lift, or how doable do you think it is for the regular person to do this on the side of a full-time job?
It's absolutely doable, Shane. I mean, I've got quite a demanding job, and I think the answer is just time management. I think it's important to be realistic and see what time you have available, and then use it as effective as possible. And to also, especially if you do, if you go the direction that I am, it's not put too much pressure on yourself. Is that to say, I can do this, but I can't do that. So either I don't go in that direction, or I sort of compromise somewhere else. I have so there are times that I'm really busy. So obviously our Q4 time is also quite busy, and I will often spend a weekend, busy with packaging and sending out invoices and, all the sort of customer service type of things. But, during the rest of the year, because the sales come in regularly and they likely spread out to a large extent, I just allocate time, usually in the evenings, check what needs to be done, what needs to go out. Initially, it was a lot of work because, things were maybe not as streamlined and you sort of still figuring things out. But as you mature the business more and you understand the processes better and you can automate and streamline better, it really becomes secondary habit. I think that's, the other important thing is just make sure that you've got your processes in place. Make sure that you have templates of everything so that you don't have to, type the same email over and over again. You can actually have a template in the background that you just tweak here and there. Make sure it's still personal, but you don't have to write the entire email, the communication through. So there's little things that you can do here and there, and absolutely doable. I mean, I spend on average maybe 4 hours a week, sort of on it if it's really necessary. Otherwise, half an hour to an hour, sort of if need be. So not really that much of an issue.
Totally doable. Just give up a couple of episodes of a Netflix show, and there you go. You can run a successful side business. That's it. Obviously, a bit more time in the beginning getting set up with the website and different things. But when you create these processes, and I love what you said there, because it's also what I continuously try to say in all my content, which is, if we build systems, we can really simplify things. When it comes to an order fulfillment, for example, a lot of people are, they get a little nervous thinking about how much time it's going to take them to find the right box that'll fit the set that they just sold, or to tape up the box and to get it shipped out and different things. If you build a little shipping station in your place of work and have the boxes that you need there, I know it'll be a little bit of an investment up front, but just spend money. I know it's also crazy to a lot of people to spend money on boxes at the start. You could just repurpose the boxes that come in the door when I order from Amazon. No, just buy the right size that you need, because then, when you make a sale, you can just get it boxed up, get it out the door immediately. There'll be no headaches, no worries. You have these systems in place. It simplifies everything, and just, it'll unstick you. It'll remove the heaviness, the weight of the feeling of running an e-commerce business. And you'll be able to use that, extra momentum to grow in other ways. So yeah, I love that. I just have two last questions for you before we close out here. I like to, I guess, reflect back on any challenges in my business. So if I were to ask you, is there anything that, or mistakes, and is there anything that you would do differently looking back at the last couple of years of building Rarity Bricks? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing is as I mentioned previously as well, is to jump in before you know where you're going and what you're doing. So, Lego investing is a great, sort of an absolute great platform, but you need to make sure that you actually, when you start out, that you start the right way and that you have the right information. As I said, I see this a lot on Facebook and all these groups. People buying stuff just because they heard that they need to buy these things, or and then they get excited about it and they don't realize they don't have a plan. They don't actually know where they're going with it or what they need to do with it. So I think that was mistake number one. And I've kept the sets that I bought, those Razor Crests. I've kept them, and I'm probably going to keep them, sort of indefinitely, because they show me again, they remind me of the mistakes that I made, and they're jumping in too quickly to rather make sure that you actually understand everything. And that's why the content that you guys provide is so useful, because you need to find some way that you can learn, and that you can learn from mistakes from others. I think that was the one thing. The other mistakes that I think that I've made that I would sort of look back on and that I do these days is to not be afraid to sell if you need to, sort of let go of stuff that is not doing well. It's almost that same as when you bought a stock and it's just going down, and you don't want to sell it. So is to make that decision. You know what? I'm going to cut my losses. I'm going to sell the set, and rather reinvest that capital. And that's, again, we say that it's so important to buy at a lower price, because your loss is obviously a lot less, and sometimes you break even. So I think initially I probably should have not hung on to stuff that was really never going to go anywhere, and sort of didn't sell it. I think that's an important one. And then, I think it's just, I think that's pretty much it. It's really just about having a plan, making sure that you understand where you're going, what you're doing, and then going with it. And I think the biggest mistake is not starting, as you said. There's so much opportunity if you've got the right mindset and just a little bit of guts to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Biggest mistake is not starting. I love it. So the last thing that I want to ask you is, what does the future look like for you and for your business? What are you excited about? When you look at the future of Rarity Bricks, where do you want to double down? Is there anything you want to stop doing? How do the next couple of years look like for you?
Yeah, so I think where we're going is, as I mentioned, I think I want to develop the automation or not the automation, but the presence of my website a little bit more in terms of the SEO. So that's why I've just, again, just hired somebody to assist me with that, to make sure that the presence is automatically there, because that will definitely significantly help with the content that I'm creating, and, all the social media aspects that take time. And that's, I think, important to know as well. It does take time to, if you're doing it yourself, to actually continuously manage the social media content. So ultimately, it is to streamline the processes more and more and more, to have less of, to be able to do the things I like, and not have to spend so much time on things that does not need to happen. If obviously the business is growing, and it's growing quite fast, I have contemplated going international, because there's a lot of demand international. Because one of the benefits of being in a market where there's less liquidity is there's also availability of sets that's long been sold out elsewhere, that's still available here. And then I often get inquiries about sets and things from overseas. The biggest problem and the biggest barrier I currently have is shipping. Shipping costs out of a country like ours is significant. So I think if I will be growing, firstly, growing obviously presence locally is important. Growing towards the right customer base is very important. I think that's where I'm headed, is to make sure that I'm getting my website in front of the people that do the right people, sort of similar to what Lego's doing with the whole marketing these days, and the adults. But going internationally is probably the only other way that I can go. I have to decide how much it's going to benefit financially in terms of, because I'm not planning to go full time. I have, I'm happy in my career and what I'm doing. This is a significant enough revenue that it is obviously providing. It's a great investment and a great business for adding additional revenue. But I'm not into that. I'm not going to be going into that sort of full-time work. So yeah. But the future would be to grow to the point where I can't grow anymore. In essence, that's the bottom line. I only stop when I need to stop.
Love it. When the 4 hours a week become too much, it's like, well, okay, we should slow down or outsource.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, this is fantastic, and what a discussion we've had here. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Once again, I really appreciate the ability to be able to talk about areas that typically are not in my content, like running, a specific Lego investing or Lego reselling website, outside of the typical Amazon, eBay, Bricklink direction. It's been amazing. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the people watching and listening have learned a lot. So thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. And I'm super excited to see more about the future of Rarity Bricks and where things go from here. I'll be following you on your socials and checking in for sure. For anybody who is tuned in here who wants to find out more about Rarity Bricks, you can go to raritybricks.co.za. Or check out Rarity Bricks on Instagram or on Facebook as well. And if you're in the South Africa area, obviously make sure to go there for your Lego buying needs as well. So this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated, and wishing you all the best with growing the business.
Thank you so much, Shane. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And for everybody watching and listening, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be back with more interviews soon as we continue with the Brick Business Show. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one.